You're not going to believe what happened at my lake cabin last weekend. I was in the middle of a quiet, private meeting with the State Attorney General, the Attorney General, discussing a local property rights issue that's been ongoing in our area. It was supposed to be low-key, off the radar, and completely confidential. But right in the middle of it, the door swung open, and in stormed the one person nobody wanted to see. HOA Karen. No knock, no notice, just loud footsteps, a clipboard, and her usual self-declared authority. She barged in like she owned the place, talking about unauthorized gatherings and unregistered visitors. The look on the Attorney General's face was priceless, equal parts confusion and disbelief. I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was stunned. She had no idea who she just interrupted. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Karen didn't just walk in and leave. She stayed. She argued. She even tried to hand the Attorney General a list of supposed violations she had been keeping on neighbors. That's when things really started to spiral. I recorded what I could, but I was focused on keeping the situation from exploding. This wasn't just some HOA misunderstanding. This crossed serious lines. You won't believe what she accused us of, or what happened when the Attorney General finally spoke up. Stick around, because what started as a peaceful meeting at the lake turned into a showdown. That might change how our whole community deals with the HOA. Let me back up a little, so this all makes more sense. My lake cabin sits just outside the official HOA boundaries, and for years, that was never a problem. It's private land, passed down in my family, and I've always kept things quiet and respectful. But lately, the HOA's been pushing into areas they technically don't manage, trying to claim oversight on anything near the water. And leading that charge, you guessed it, Karen. She moved into the neighborhood less than a year ago, and somehow decided she was the unofficial enforcer of every rule, real or imagined. I've had run-ins with her before, notes left on my door, unwanted photos taken from the road, warnings about things like my dock lighting and non-compliant landscaping. Whatever that means, I've mostly ignored it, thinking she'd eventually back off. But crashing a meeting with the State Attorney General, that was something else entirely. This wasn't just about me anymore. The Attorney General was here to listen to concerns from several residents about HOA overreach and possible violations of state property laws. We picked the cabin for privacy and peace. Karen choosing that exact moment to storm in couldn't have been random. Either she was watching or someone told her what was going on. Either way, it raised a big question: how far was she willing to go? She stood there, clipboard in hand, rattling off nonsense about unauthorized political activity on HOA monitored property. And the Attorney General, he just looked at me and said, "Is this normal around here?" I didn't even know how to answer him at first. Is this normal around here? Honestly, I wish I could have said no. But this kind of thing was becoming normal. Karen had been getting bolder lately, acting like the HOA gave her full legal authority. She wasn't elected to anything. And as far as we knew, the board hadn't even approved most of what she was doing. But that hadn't stopped her from making surprise inspections, trying to find people, even threatening to escalate things to the county. Now, here she was, interrupting a private conversation with the State Attorney General, waving a list of violations that had nothing to do with him or this meeting. She kept talking, barely letting anyone get a word in. She said we hadn't filed an event permit, that the cabin was being used for non-residential purposes, and that HOA regulations prohibited outside guests unless pre-approved. The fact that she thought those rules applied to my family's private cabin on non-HOA land told me everything. The Attorney General stayed calm, but I could tell he was measuring every word. He asked her, "Do you represent the HOA in any official capacity?" She hesitated, then said she was acting under community interest, which wasn't an answer at all. Outside, I noticed a couple of neighbors had gathered. Word travels fast around here, especially when Karen's involved. One of them mouthed, "Is that the Attorney General?" And I realized this was about to get bigger than just me and Karen. Karen wasn't backing down, even after being questioned by the Attorney General. She kept flipping pages on her clipboard, pointing to made-up rules and demanding we wrap up the unauthorized meeting. It was almost surreal-like. She truly believed she could shut down a conversation with one of the top legal officials in the state. The cabin, quiet and calm minutes before, now filled with tension you could feel in the air. I could see the Attorney General starting to lose patience. He politely asked her again to clarify her role, and she dodged the question. She kept saying she was enforcing community standards and that she had every right to enter, because she believed a violation was in progress. That's when he asked a question that stopped her cold. "Did you obtain permission to enter this property?" She didn't answer. Meanwhile, more neighbors had gathered near the edge of the property, drawn by the noise and curious about the unexpected visit. Some of them had their phones out. A few whispered to each other, and I heard someone say, "She tried this with us last month too." The tension was growing by the second. Karen wasn't just embarrassing herself, she was drawing attention to how far this so-called authority of hers had gone. The Attorney General turned to me and calmly said, "I think it's time we escalate this buck, not the way she expects." At that moment, Karen finally stopped talking. For the first time, she looked nervous, just as things seemed like they couldn't get any more intense. The Attorney General stepped outside to take a quick call. I figured he was phoning someone from his office, but a few minutes later, two unmarked government vehicles pulled up right behind the parked cars by the road. Out stepped a pair of state investigators, people I didn't expect to see anywhere near my quiet lake cabin. They introduced themselves briefly, then asked if they could speak to both me and the Attorney General in private. Karen was still standing there, trying to eavesdrop. But they asked her to step back. That's when one of the investigators dropped the real twist. Karen's name had already come up in an ongoing inquiry about harassment complaints linked to overstepping HOA authority. Apparently, mine wasn't the first case where she had entered private property, made false legal claims, or intimidated homeowners. Several residents had quietly submitted reports, but none had hard evidence until now. They wanted to review the footage from my security cams and anything I had recorded during the meeting. When I agreed, they nodded and said, "This could help a lot of people in this area." Meanwhile, Karen stood by the porch, watching everything unfold, but still trying to maintain her smug posture. She had no idea the situation had taken a much bigger turn. This wasn't just about one cabin, or even this neighborhood. It was now officially on the radar of state legal authorities, and it was clear they were taking it seriously. The state investigators reviewed my footage on the spot. One of them plugged a drive into my outdoor camera system and watched silently as the scene unfolded. Karen marching up the steps, barging through the door without knocking, interrupting the meeting, and then arguing with the Attorney General, like she ran the place. You could feel the shift when they saw it all play out uncut. No more questions, no more speculation. This was hard proof. They walked back out onto the porch, where Karen was still standing with crossed arms and a defensive look. One investigator calmly told her, "Ma'am, we've documented your entry onto private property without consent, misrepresentation of authority, and attempted obstruction of a state-level meeting. You'll need to come with us for further questioning." Her expression dropped like a stone. She tried to speak, but the Attorney General cut her off politely and firmly. "It's best if you don't say anything else right now." Neighbors gasped as they saw her escorted toward the vehicles, not in cuffs, but clearly not free to go either. Just as I thought it was all over, one of the investigators turned to me and asked, "Did you know your cabin is on a short list for historical preservation status?" I had no idea. Apparently, the state had been reviewing the property quietly for years. And this event had just accelerated everything. So not only was Karen exposed, but her stunt may have secured legal protection for my land for generations to come. After the investigators left with Karen, the lake cabin finally felt calm again. The Attorney General stayed a little longer, going over next steps with me and thanking me for staying level-headed through all of it. He said the video evidence would support ongoing efforts to hold HOAs accountable when individuals misuse power. Honestly, it was a moment I won't forget, standing there by the water, realizing a simple cabin meeting had turned into something much bigger. A few days later, I got official notice from the state confirming that my cabin was now under review for historical preservation. That meant added legal protections, including limits on who could access or interfere with the property. In a strange way, Karen's intrusion ended up pushing things forward in a positive direction, even though that clearly wasn't her goal. Neighbors came by over the next week, sharing their own stories. Some had been warned about firewood stacks, others about porch furniture.